Hey there, so even though I would normally rather chew on glass than utter the words "I'm a feminist but," I feel like this is how I have to start this video, which is why it's snowing on my channel today, which, like many things in this conversation, makes perfect sense. There are many anti-feminists who argue as if all feminists were like a united front. We share the same beliefs and we agree on everything, which cannot be further from the truth. Actually, I think sometimes it would be easier to handcuff a cat than to make two feminists agree on an issue. And that is okay. But then there are also the feminists who do tend to have an us versus them mentality, and if you don't agree with them on an issue, then you're either not a real feminist or you're a bad feminist. Which is unfortunate because I feel infighting is something that's unavoidable at one point or another in any given community. In fact, whenever I hear people complain about infighting, I just want to sarcastically quote Mean Girls at them. I wish we could all get along like we used to in middle school. I wish I could bake a cake filled with rainbows and smiles and everyone would eat and be happy. And you know what? I often wish that as well. But then I remember we're not in middle school anymore and I get over it. Alcohol helps. So without further ado, I am a feminist, but I just cannot get behind this tendency I see from many feminists to bash the shit out of gamers. Now, first of all, I am not a gamer, but I did at one point become absolutely obsessed with one particular video game. It was called Red Alert, and it was about 15 years ago or so. I think the game became somewhat popular in Romania because it played into our entire anti-Russia nationalism thing we got going on. It was one of those games where the view is from above and you're supposed to build infrastructures so then you can build more buildings and like tanks and soldiers so you can defend yourself against or attack the Russian army. And what can I say? It was fun. I would come back from school, usually annoyed at some dickhead teacher or classmate, and I would rush to my computer and blow off some steam by killing myself some Russians. I don't know what that accent was. In fact, I became so obsessed with that game, and I'm actually curious if this is like a common experience among gamers, because it was pretty weird. I would actually dream about playing the game. I mean, very realistic dreams, which sometimes got me confused because I would go back to the game and be like, hold on, I already finished this campaign. Oh no, I didn't, that was in my dreams. Okay, that's normal. I stopped playing the game for basically two reasons. First was that I had to study for some stupid finals or something and it was really distracting, so in order to stop myself from playing it, I had to literally uninstall it from my PC. Second reason, in all honesty, is that I just wasn't very good at it. I couldn't really improve my time on the campaigns by much, and my army would get totally destroyed if I played on the most difficult level, so I just kind of sucked and gave up. Yay me! Anyway, I'm sharing this just to explain that even though I'm not a gamer myself, I can relate to being one. And it just bothers me to see gamers be vilified for this hobby. Just to give an example, a few months back, Anita Sarkeesian was live tweeting from a conference about the game Doom, saying a few minutes into the conference and its wall-to-wall glorification of grotesque violence. I can barely watch. It's really troubling and depressing that the audience is enthusiastically cheering for bodies being ripped apart. This level of extreme violence shouldn't be considered normal. It's not an excuse to say it's expected because Doom. And I do remember at the time reading that and being like, girl, wait. What? Doom is about extreme violence. That is the game. So how can extreme violence not be expected? Another tweet from Jonathan McIntosh said, "This shit is sick. There is something deeply, seriously wrong with anyone cheering for this." And the thing is, lately I'm seeing this sentiment mirrored more and more by people I like and follow on social media who bash gamers as being these misogynistic asshole losers with a boner for violence. And it frankly just makes me feel so disappointed! Now, as most of you know, Anita Sarkeesian and Jonathan McIntosh are the two people behind Feminist Frequency, and personally, I'm actually not opposed to their project at all. I think it can be really interesting to explore and analyze different stereotypes and tropes in video games which can be sexist towards women, or men too, I should say. So my problem is not with the project in itself, but rather with their conclusions. Because what they're basically claiming is that there is a correlation between playing these violent video games, which sometimes contain sexist tropes, and real-life violence and sexism. And I'm sorry, but the evidence simply doesn't point that way. In fact, if anything, the increase in popularity for violent video games can be correlated to a decrease in real-life violence. And I also disagree with the opposition when they claim, well, some of them claim, or at least imply, that long-term exposure to media content has absolutely no effect on our perception of reality and consequently on our behavior, because I don't think that's true either. Take for instance that wonderful mid-90s trend known as Heroin chic, which promoted the feminine ideal of beauty as being super skinny, straight up and down, no curves and no fat on you. And I don't mean just in the modeling industry, but everywhere in the media. In fact, if you binge watch on some shows from back then, you can literally see the actresses shrinking on your screen from one season to the next. You may remember fat shaming being at its peak back then, and all the magazine stands being filled with Christina Aguilera, she's getting fat. Britney Spears, look at her cellulite. Look at it. When the fact is, even for most celebrities who have personal chefs and personal trainers and nutritionists and all that at their disposal, and it's still hard, sometimes impossible, to reach that body type without any additional purging or restrictive dieting or drugs or things that will ultimately harm your body. And you can clearly correlate that to a sudden rise in eating disorders. So yes, I do think media content can affect real-life behavior, but I think that's when the media content is presented and perceived as reality. But when we are talking fantasy, like video games or even cartoons, because even there's a discussion now about women's bodies not being realistically represented, and I'm like, it's an animated drawing. Like, really? As a kid, I was so obsessed with Disney movies, but never in my life have I felt the need to look like the princess, because no real woman I ever saw looked like that. With their waist literally the size of their neck and absolutely flawless faces that you will never ever see in real life. I mean, people can differentiate between fantasy and reality, unless you have some sort of psychosis. And if that's the case, then it was clearly not induced by a video game. We know enough to understand that's a lot more complex than that. And it's not even relevant to the discussion because we are talking about the average gamer here. There's also much criticism about what's called the male gaze, and how in some video games the camera pans over different body parts of a woman, like her breasts and her butt, objectifying her. Which, by the way, they do to male characters as well, with the camera panning over his huge pecs and biceps and his realistically impossible 20-pack abs. I guess my question is, what is the damage done here? Who is the victim of what? Who is suffering? These are fictional animated characters being objectified, not real people, so how the hell can you objectify what's already an object? And the claim that what happens in this fantasy world then spills into reality and you start objectifying people in real life, I'm sorry, but that's, again, unfounded. How can I get behind it if there's no evidence pointing that way? Now, as I said before, I'm not a gamer, but what I am is a horror fan. And I'm talking books, movies. I mean, I am a movie fanatic in general. I don't go a day without watching a movie, but horror is my favorite genre. And I think this is what prompted me to make this video, actually, because during this time especially I binge on horror flicks. I mean, it's October, it's Halloween, and I feel that those tweets I showed earlier, which are targeted towards gamers, can very well apply to me as a horror fan. I mean, we make top best death scenes and get excited about people dying in horrifyingly creative ways. That doesn't mean we want to see people gutted in real life. In fact, I hate real life violence. I could never watch something like a snuff film. In fact, just the thought that such a thing exists is deeply disturbing to me. So then why do I like horror? Honestly, I don't know, especially since I'm the first to admit that like 99% of all horror films are absolute and pure garbage. But every once in a while there comes a good horror film. And this is the kind of movie that can accomplish anything a drama can. It can make you cry, it can make you angry, it can make you laugh like a good comedy. But on top of that, it can also do something that no other genre can, and that is scare you shitless. So why do I like being scared? Again, I don't know. There is something so thrilling about being really scared or horrified while at the same time knowing nobody's getting hurt. It's just a storyline and characters, it's fantasy. Because if people were in actual danger, I would definitely not enjoy it. To make a very flawed analogy, some women have rape fantasies. Does that mean that they secretly want to get raped in real life? For real? No, absolutely fucking not. It's just a way to eroticize a deep-rooted fear that almost every woman has. It's a way to experience that violence while having complete control over it, something that obviously cannot happen in real life. And I think that's the main appeal video games have. I mean, I'm sure in real life most of these players would be appalled at the idea of shooting another person, and most of them would probably agree that a battlefield is the last place they ever want to be in. However, with video games you can experience all this violence while never being in any danger, never hurting anybody. And you know, I do think it's interesting and potentially productive to analyze these sexist tropes in video games and maybe ask for more female representation if there is a need to, or more diversity in general. I think that's fine, and call me crazy, but I don't think most gamers would have a problem with that. I mean, why have a problem with that? More awesome characters to choose from, more storylines besides the age-old damsel in distress and whatnot. I don't think anybody would be opposed to this. But if this is the goal, you know, creating more games, better games, and I do hope that is the goal, then what need is there to vilify gamers in the process? I mean, what possible good can that do to anything? If there is sexism within an industry, that doesn't mean that the consumers of that industry are sexist. You can also find plenty of sexist tropes in horror movies or in rap music. For instance, you can argue that Baby Got Back heavily features the women as booty shakers trope. That doesn't mean that if I like the song, which by the way I do very much, that makes me some sexist pig who sees women as objects. In the same way, just because I like Friday the 13th, it doesn't mean that I would like to see teenagers die in horrible ways in real life. And if you like to play Doom, that doesn't mean that, as Macintosh put it, there is something deeply and seriously wrong with you. No! If you like to play Doom, that only says one thing about you, that you like to play Doom. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're fine. Now, on the other hand, if you're one of those people who like to go around the internet making death threats and rape threats and whatnot, then yes, there is definitely something wrong with you, especially if you mean it. And if you don't mean it and you just do it to be a troll, then I guess there's something else wrong with you. Just to end this, with the risk of sounding like a total hippie, I do believe that we would get so much more accomplished if instead of jumping on to judge and vilify each other, we would just try to relate to one another more and understand one another more. That's my cue to stop. Please let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below, and if you took anything useful out of this video at all, please consider giving it a thumbs up like the old folks. And I do have a video planned for Halloween that I hope it's gonna get posted by Halloween. If not, happy Halloween.